What's up everyone, my name's PlatinumHowler and today I'm bringing you my week 4 match of the IBL D-League versus Gravy and his Los Angeles Valienteis. You can see his team over on the right hand side of the screen with his 2 Z users being Victini and Aerodactyl. Just a quick side note, I have to say that the Los Angeles Valienteis is probably one of my favorite draft league team names that I've ever seen. Just by the fact that it's not named after a traditional sports team, but it's actually named after an eSports team. The LA Valiant are like a Overwatch eSports team, and like I don't know this because I myself play Overwatch, but I just happen to know this because I have a friend who's a pretty big Overwatch fan. So shoutouts to him and shoutouts to Gravy because I really like the cool and unique team name. Anyways, looking at what he's got, the most notable combination and the most notable threat that he has for us this week is Tapu Bulu plus Hawlucha. Now, you often see Tapu Koko plus Hawlucha. That's a pretty common core both in OU and in Draft League format, and it's very scary to go up against because Hawlucha can get a defense boost from the terrain and then it activates its Unburden. It can set up and be really fast and hit really hard. It's a really hard combination to go up against. But then you add the fact that Hawlucha has the option to Baton Pass, so it could potentially Baton Pass a Swords Dance plus the defense boost from Grassy Seed if it were to come in with Grassy Terrain up. And yeah, that's really scary. And if that were to happen, I don't like our chances in this game, honestly. I was well prepared for potential Baton Pass, Scolipede, and Mega Mawile week 1 just because I had the right Mon to match up against that. This week I don't really have that, so we're gonna hope that if the Hawlucha comes, it's not gonna Baton Pass into something like a Choice Scarf Victini, so it can V-Create and kill everything, because that would mean that we lose, and we don't want to lose. So, also, just to be clear, if he gets the Unburden boost from the Unburden speed boost from the Grassy Seed, he doesn't actually Baton Pass speed with that. He has his speed boost on Hawlucha, but like he can't Baton Pass that speed boost that he gains from Unburden to another Mon on his team. So that makes passing with other stats with Hawlucha completely legal here. Anyways, now getting into my team. For the first time, we have our Cloyster, because I wanted to bring Cloyster. Like, I don't want to go the whole season with this thing sitting on the bench. Eventually, I'm going to have to bring Kangaskhan for the same reason. I'm going to have to find one of these next 5 games. I'm going to have to bring Kangaskhan because I'm not drafting him on to not ever bring it. So, Shell Smash, Icicle Spear, Hydro Pump, Rock Blast. Pretty standard set. Hydro Pump is actually on the standard RU Shell Smash set for Cloyster, and because he has a Mega Aggron, we need Hydro Pump to hit that thing because that thing is very bulky, and we cannot. The Hydro Pump is the best move that we have to hit that. Despite its low accuracy, we have to go for it against Mega Aggron. It does about 52 to 62% to a max Spadef Mega Aggron at +2, so after a Shell Smash. So in order to get this off, we're going to have to make sure that the Aggron is low enough so that it cannot survive a Hydro Pump. And we're also going to have to hope that we hit the Hydro Pump against the Aggron. And we do have a Rock Blast as well for the Tentacruel specifically, and also any Silvally type that he might bring that resists Icicle Spear. Other than that, Icicle Spear does a lot of damage to his team. He has a lot of ice weaknesses such as Bulu, Hawlucha, Togekiss, Hydreigon. Speaking of Tentacruel, we will also have to make sure that the Tentacruel is weakened a little bit. Not quite to the extent of Mega Aggron, but a max defense Tentacruel can deal with, can take a Rock Blast fairly well. Next up, we have our maxed physically defensive Dhelmise, which is meant to take on the likes of Mega Aggron and Tapu Bulu. Obviously, if I wanted a better check to Tapu Bulu, I would bring Skarmory, being a 4x grass resist and having a lot of physical bulk. But honestly, Skarmory outside of Tapu Bulu has a pretty terrible matchup in this game. There's a lot of things that a lot of offensive threats that he can bring in fairly safely against Skarmory, such as Victini, that I don't particularly want to switch into with the rest of my team. So instead, we have this Dhelmise to take on the Tapu Bulu. It has Anchor Shot to hit it super effectively, and also we have it to trap in, to potentially trap in the Mega Aggron and then whittle that thing down with Shadow Balls. And in the event that he gets a Toxic off on my Dhelmise and tries to whittle me down that way, I can rest up to full HP and eat my Chesto Berry to make sure that I can continue weakening that Aggron, continue trying to put it in range to die from a Hydro Pump from Cloyster. And of course, we also have Rapid Spin to get rid of any rocks that he might want to set up, because we don't want Cloyster's Sash to be broken. I don't believe that he has a spin blocker on his team unless he brings a ghost type Silvally. We can do a little bit of damage to that thing with a Shadow Ball if need be. Next up, we have Sylveon once again for the 4th week in a row. This time we are not bringing a more offensive set as we have in the past 2 weeks, but instead we are bringing a defensive set that can take on Hawlucha if Hawlucha were ever to get out of hand, and it can also switch into Hydreigon fairly easily. We have standard Wish, Protect, and Hyper Voice, but this week in the last move slot we're going for Calm Mind, because if I get the defense boost from Grassy Seed, that will help me take on the Hawlucha, because if Hawlucha comes in and becomes really scary, then Grassy Terrain will be up, so I can make sure that I switch my Sylveon in to also get the defense boost from Grassy Terrain. So if he doesn't have enough firepower for this, and I can manage to avoid this thing from getting Toxic and whittle down that way, this Sylveon could potentially sweep him. I don't know about it sweeping through a Mega Aggron, but at the very least, it forces Mega Aggron in to get weakened for the Shell Smash Cloyster, like I mentioned. I also said that Tentacruel was a Mon that we would have to chip down in order to put it in range for Cloyster to potentially win this game, so that's why we have our Raikou this week to pivot into Tentacruel and Togekiss as well. We have Assault Vest to take hits as well as possible. We are bringing the Rash Nature with Aura Sphere once again so that we can hit the likes of Hydreigon and Piloswine, and it also hits Mega Aggron super effectively. Volt Switch, Thunderbolt, Volt Switch for pivoting. I see this thing coming in against Tentacruel and or Togekiss and threatening him out with Electric type moves. I want this Raikou to get in and get out so I can get something else on my team in that can do the most work. And then we also have Shadow Ball on this to hit the Victini super effectively. Also coming for the 4th week in a row, we have our Nidoqueen with Stealth Rocks, but this is a much faster Nidoqueen that I've brought in the past. It's a timid nature this time, and I put enough speed on this Nidoqueen to outspeed a Togekiss that wanted to speed creep an adamant Mega Gyarados, because if I need this Nidoqueen to take on the Togekiss, I want to make sure that I'm faster than it so I don't get flinched down by Air Slash. Earth Power, Sludge Wave, Ice Beam is just, in general, good coverage against his team and pretty much every team. Last but not least, we have the team mascot, Mega Gyarados, making its return. But this is not your everyday Mega Gyarados set, as you can see. Very different set from what we've brought in the past. This is a very support-oriented Mega Gyarados with Toxic and taunt to prevent rocks from going up from the likes of, he has 3 possible rock setters, Pillow Swine, Aerodactyl. Of course it can't get a taunt off on Aerodactyl before rocks go up, but it does threaten the Aerodactyl out pretty well. We can taunt the Mega Aggron, prevent it from going for stuff like Thunder Wave, Toxic, and Stealth Rock. And then we have Scald on our Mega Gyarados, and pretty much the only reason we have Scald is if I get this in versus the Mega Aggron, and he wants to switch out into Tapu Bulu. Tapu Bulu is a very, very good response to Mega Gyarados. Mega Gyarados does not get poison coverage to hit it for 4 times super effective damage. The best thing it can do to it is go for an Iron Head or an Iron Tail. But instead, I'm going for Scald so I can potentially, if the Aggron wants to stay in on Gyarados, I can Scald, chip that thing down. Again, try to put it in range for Cloyster to kill it off with a +2 Hydro Pump. Or if he decides to switch into Bulu, I can go for a Scald and potentially burn the Bulu, and that makes it so much easier to deal with. Much like the Nidoqueen, we have a lot of speed investment, and this investment is going to allow us to outspeed a non-speed invested Tentacruel. So he won't be speed invested if he is trying to put everything into its physical defense to take on Cloyster. So that's why we have enough speed on there for the Tentacruel, and we can weaken that thing with a Crunch. That's going to be our team against Gray this week. You'll see that for the second week in a row, I am not bringing my first overall pick and primary Z captain in Infernape. So I'm not sure how I feel about Infernape at this point. I'm just liking the other mons on my team a little bit better, wanting to give other things a chance. So not like my opponents can just stop prepping for it. It is an Infernape, it's a big threat, you gotta be able to prep for it, so you never know, maybe Gray over preps for the Infernape and we catch him off guard with some of the other sets that we bring, and we can get a win and bring us back up to 500, which is what we desperately need. So I'll be right back with the battle. Here we are back with the battle, and looking at the team that Gray decided to bring, I am both shocked and thrilled. There is no Mega Aggron that I have to weaken by about 40% and then risk an 80% Hydro Pump against. There is no Tentacruel, which could have been another potential check to Cloyster, and that I would have had to make sure I weakened by about 30%. There is no Howlucha to benefit from Tapu Bulu's grassy terrain and get Unburden against me, which could have potentially outsped my Cloyster after a Shell Smash. So Valley doesn't make an appearance, so that's another mon that I don't have to scout to see what typing it is, don't have to scout if I have to weaken it at all for Cloyster. And then there's no Aerodactyl, which could have been a threatening Z user that could have very easily carried Taunt and made Cloyster setting up on it more difficult. Also could have easily flinched it with the super effective Rock Slide, prevented it from getting a Shell Smash off. So basically, look at his team and then look at Cloyster. Cloyster absolutely has a field day against this team. Setting up a Shell Smash shouldn't be that difficult as long as I can keep rocks off the field and get Cloyster in as soon as possible to click Shell Smash and destroy things. I should be in very, very good shape here. Piloswine is the only potential rocker that he has on his team, so I'm going to decide to lead with my Mega Gyarados to combat that. Also matches up well against a potential lead Victini. I'd like to have a good matchup against that thing if it decides to lead off immediately, but he's actually going to decide to lead off with his Heliolisk. And I can take hits from this pretty easily and fire off a big Crunch, but I decide when I have a Nidoqueen in the back, I don't particularly want to let my Gyarados get weakened so early in the match. He's going to make the pretty simple prediction and go for a U-turn. Doesn't do much damage at all to my Nidoqueen. I'm going to recover all of that back with my Black Sludge, and he is going to bring in the Piloswine to get his rocks up on turn 2. Forces me out, or it doesn't force me out, but it threatens me with his dual stab that are both super effective, but I'm actually going to stay in and forgo setting up my own rocks to let this Piloswine set up rocks, and I'm going to go for 2 Earth Powers against this Piloswine to weaken it. So now it is definitely in range of Cloyster. This Piloswine is pretty fat. I would have had to potentially risk a Hydro Pump against it, which I preferably would not like to do. It does have thick fat, so technically it resists Icicle Spear. Doesn't take much damage from that. So on this turn, I'm going to go for an Ice Beam. In case he wanted to stay in, just that little bit of extra chip against the Piloswine would have been fine. It would have helped it put it in range, closer in range for Cloyster to potentially knock it out. And if he wanted to switch out on a predicted Earth Power, then I would catch the Hydreigon on the switch, as I just did. But it turns out to be a pretty fat Hydreigon with leftovers, as you can see by the damage. So now I'm going to decide to preserve my Nidoqueen. I have a Sylveon in the back that is especially designed to take on this Hydreigon. I can preserve the Nidoqueen to potentially take on the Togekiss later on in the match. And he's going to reveal Taunt on his Hydreigon, which means that Cloyster cannot set up against this Hydreigon because it can easily taunt and prevent me from going for a Shell Smash. My only play here is to stay in and click Hyper Voice, my only attacking move. I didn't want to predict switch out on his part and then him have U-turn and get momentum on me. So the Victini was a pretty obvious switch in there. It doesn't take much from the Hyper Voice at all. And now I'm going to bring in my Gyarados against this as he goes for a Zen Headbutt, which isn't going to do much at all to Gyarados, given I just intimidated the Victini. And now I'm going to Mega Evolve, predict this Hydreigon to come in, and go for a Toxic. Putting this thing on a timer is really helpful. Looks like it's a pretty bulky Hydreigon, so wearing that thing down with a Toxic is going to be really nice. Also, I didn't really have much else on this Gyarados to hit the Hydreigon, so a Toxic on pretty much anything would have been nice. He didn't have a single Toxic immunity on his team. So at this point, I'm thinking rocks are up. I need to get rid of them so Cloyster Sash isn't broken. I want to try to bait in the Bulu so I can bring Dhelmise in safely and get a Rapid Spin. That's why I'm going to bring in the Raikou against this Hydreigon so that I can potentially bait his Bulu to be the switch-in into this. He goes for a Roost with his Hydreigon, brings himself back up to full, although he is going to take a little bit of chip from the Toxic, and I'm going to go for an Aura Sphere here if he wanted to stay in. Aura Sphere was going to whittle that thing down in tandem with the Toxic. Also would have hit the Piloswine if he wanted to bring that in. But he is going to bring in the Bulu. I get the Aura Sphere damage off, and he gets Grassy Terrain Recovery first, which tells me that this is a Scarfed Bulu. So I am not going to stay in against this Bulu and go for a Volt Switch. I'm gonna make sure I hard switch into the Dhelmise as he goes for a Wood Hammer. And because he is Scarfed and not another boosting item, Dhelmise takes this much, much more comfortably. So I know that he's now locked into Wood Hammer. I can get a Rapid Spin off against this Tapu Bulu, and he's going to switch out into the Hydreigon once again. And now rocks are off the field. That's great. Cloyster Sash is now going to be staying intact unless he manages to get rocks up again with the Piloswine. But that is at around 40% now, so that might be difficult, and Dhelmise is still at a reasonable amount of health to get another spin off if it needs. So now he goes into Victini, presumably predicting my Sylveon switch in, but I don't want to allow my Sylveon to get taunted. Instead, I'm going to go into my Nidoqueen, and it turns out I'm going to get a hefty amount of recovery here from both the Grassy Terrain and the Black Sludge. But I decide here in my Sylveon to switch this in. As this is the last turn of Grassy Terrain, I can pop my Grassy Seed and potentially start setting up some Calm Minds and doing a lot of damage to his team. But I get crit by this V-Create, and it takes out my Sylveon in one hit, which is kind of unfortunate, but also not unfortunate at the same time, because this is the perfect opportunity to bring in Cloyster now against this -1 Victini and go for a Shell Smash. As you can see, even after the speed drop, his Victini outspeeds my Cloyster, which means he is Scarfed. So that means that's now 2 Scarfers on his team, Tapu Bulu and Victini, both Scarfed. Very interesting. I'll be able to outspeed both of them with my Cloyster, which is now at +2 anyway, so I'm totally fine with both of them being Scarfed, but I get my Shell Smash up. Gonna go for a Rock Blast. I need to hit the Rock Blast against the Victini to make sure I knock it out, but he's actually going to go into the Hydreigon and basically sack this off. 5 hits from Rock Blast is not going to be enough to take it out, but that is fine. I can easily go for an Icicle Spear on the next turn. And I'm looking in pretty good position at this point. I mean, all I needed to do was get a Shell Smash up with this Cloyster, and he was going to be in a lot of trouble. So now this Icicle Spear is going to be enough to get rid of this Hydreigon. And we're gonna see what his responses are to this Cloyster here. He goes into the Victini next. Probably needs to bank on me missing a Rock Blast, which I don't. Thank you, Cloyster, so much for being nice and accurate with those Rock Blasts. 3 Rock Blasts barely isn't enough to knock it out, but the fourth one easily does it. Next in is going to be the Heliolisk, which he might have, if he was Scarfed, he could have potentially hoped to outspeed me, but I made sure to EV this Cloyster to be faster than a Scarfed Heliolisk. And this thing is frail as all hell. It almost dies from 2 Icicle Spear hits. Goes down to the 3rd one. Now he only has 3 Rons remaining. And I feel that I'm in a good enough position to not risk a miss with either Hydro Pump or Rock Blast. So I'm going to go for the Icicle Spear. I think it has a chance to knock it out, but Piloswine is taking these hits pretty well. That 4th hit really looked like it didn't do anything, and it actually survives all 5 hits from Icicle Spear, goes for an Earthquake, and is able to knock out my Cloyster. So, unfortunately, Cloyster wasn't able to finish the job, but I feel I have enough resources left to still win this game. All he has left is this Piloswine, which is really low, and then Togekiss and Tapu Bulu. So Mega Gyarados is going to come in, and he's going to sack off this Piloswine to a Scald, and we're going to get a Scald KO with Mega Gyarados. Of all moves, Scald is going to gain a KO on a freaking Mega Gyarados. I think that's hilarious. But now that Togekiss comes in, this is exactly what I have my Raikou for. I'm going to switch it in with my Assault Vest. I'm going to take this Dazzling Gleam decently well. It's actually going to do a little bit more than I thought, which I think means that this is a slightly offensive variant of Togekiss. But anyways, I take that comfortably. I'm able to go for a Volt Switch on this turn as he switches out into the Tapu Bulu again. He's going to reset the Grassy Surge. And this is now going to allow me to bring in my Delmise, my dedicated response to this Tapu Bulu. And both of his remaining Mons are weak to my Steel-type move, Anchor Shot. So that's what I'm going to click here. Regardless of if he decides to stay in or switch out, he's going to be trapped in afterwards. He won't be able to switch out, because that's a great thing about Anchor Shot, being able to trap the opponent in, and it prevents it takes away the possibility of him from trying to make aggressive double switches to allow him to get back in the game. So he's going to Scarf himself into Nature's Madness, so I know after I take this first one that I have a free rest on this turn. I'm going to be able to rest up back to full health and eat my Chesto Berry. He misses the second Nature's Madness, which doesn't really matter because I would have got up to full health at the end of this turn anyway. I would have preferred him to miss the third Nature's Madness over the second Nature's Madness, because then I wouldn't have taken 50% and been back up to about, I don't know, 56% after I knocked this out with a second Anchor Shot. Togekiss is his last Mon. There's no reason for me to preserve this here. Delmise, if he wants to stay in and try to set up, that could potentially be scary. So he does go for Fire Blast, which is enough to knock out my Delmise. it was enough to knock out Delmise, and had I decided to switch in my Raikou to it once again, it could have potentially 2-hit KO'd. So leaving Delmise in there was definitely my best play. I go for Thunderbolt. It's not enough to take out the Togekiss, which is to be expected. I mean, Togekiss is a pretty fat mon in general. It has really high base special defense, but I take 1 Dazzling Gleam and 2 Thunderbolts. It's going to be more than enough to take out the Togekiss, and that's going to be the game. We're going to win 3-0. Huge win to get us back on track. GG to Gray. His links, of course, will be in the description. Make sure you go check out his side of the battle. This was a very well-played game by me. I'm a hell of a lot more satisfied with the way I played this game versus the way I played last week's game. I will admit that the team that Gray brought made it pretty easy on me to execute my game plan. I mean, he just had nothing to take on Cloyster. Like, had I risked the potential miss on a Rock Blast against the Piloswine, Cloyster and the Rock Slide hit against the Piloswine, that would have been enough to knock it out. Of course, it does benefit from Thick Fat, so it takes some reduced damage from the Icicle Spear. Because it was so low, Rock Slide or Rock Blast definitely would have been enough from the Cloyster to knock out the Piloswine, and then his remaining 2 mons just died to Icicle Spear. So Cloyster could have potentially wrapped this game up with 6 KOs, and we could have got a 5-0 win if I had just decided to risk the Rock Blast against the Piloswine. But regardless, I am still very, very happy to get a 3-0 win here and get us back in the win column. Every mon on the team this week did its job. Raikou did well to handle the Togekiss, picking up the kill against it late in the game. Delmise did well to take on the Tapu Bulu and also being able to spin away the rocks, making it easier for Cloyster to come in and set up a Shell Smash. Even Sylveon helped, even though it didn't really see much screen time and unfortunately got crit by that Victini's V-Create. But that crit was sort of a blessing in disguise because it opened the door for me to bring in Cloyster in a very good position and get the Shell Smash off. Looking back, switching in Sylveon there, even though I did get the Grassy Seed boost on that turn, was probably not the best play. Probably would have preferred to just have Sylveon in the back for Hydreigon as long as Hydreigon was around. As you saw, it turns out that I didn't need to preserve Nidoqueen for the late game, so letting Nidoqueen go down there to any hit from Victini probably would have been the smarter play, and then I could have brought Cloyster in. But at least if he had gone for a Zen Headbutt to knock me out, and stayed in, gone for another Zen Headbutt, and flinched my Cloyster, maybe he could have flinched my Cloyster down with some Zen Headbutts as I tried to set up the Shell Smash, and I would have been pretty upset that the hacks would screwed me over that way. But I mean, hey, when you think about it that way, maybe switching the Sylveon there wasn't that big of a misplay. And then, of course, the most hype moment of the match, Mega Gyarados, the team mascot, gets a KO with Scald. Come on, how can you not be impressed with that? Anyways, we do improve to 2-2 with a +1 differential. We look to continue moving up the standings next week when we take on Sock and his Minnesota Twin Needles. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and to subscribe to the channel for future IBL videos. And we will see you next week for the Week 5 match against Sock.